Started day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'm John Dickerson. Join me for the Daily Report, weekdays on CBS News 24/7.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Thanks for joining us here on CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following right now. From coast to coast, Americans are celebrating Independence Day. Preparations are underway in New York City for the 48th annual Macy's Fireworks Show. And this will be the first time since 2013 that the show will launch over the Hudson River on the west side of the city. Other big displays are planned in Los Angeles and, of course, the National Mall in Washington. A source tells CBS News an Israeli delegation is heading to Qatar for talks on a ceasefire and hostage deal. President Biden discussed the push to finalize the plan with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. Their call happened the same day Hezbollah launched hundreds of rockets at multiple military bases in Israel. Polls are now closed in the UK's general election. Early indications suggest voters are ready to oust Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party after 14 years in office in favor of Keir Starmer's Labour Party. The stark political reversal is a reflection of the turmoil that has engulfed the country and its economy since the UK voted to exit the European Union in 2016. That does it for now. CBS Reports, America Unfiltered, the voices behind the polls is next. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Thanks for watching.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
Hello, everyone. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington, and welcome to a special Independence Day edition of America Decides. CBS News polls consistently show that democracy and the American dream itself is on the ballot this November. But why do voters think that, and how do their personal lives shape their views on our national conversations? Well, our polling director, Anthony Salvanto, joined the CBS Reports documentary team to find out. And for the next half hour, Anthony will talk to people from across America who participated in our polls and others who share their views for unfiltered conversations about the state of freedom and the American dream. And then Anthony will join me right here in the studio with CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett and CBS News Political Director Fin Gomez to discuss how these sentiments shared in this documentary play out at the national level and what it all means ahead of the presidential election in November and beyond. From CBS Reports, America Unfiltered, the voices behind the polls, begins now.
This morning, more than 3/4 of Americans say things in this country are going badly.
On Roe v. Wade, new CBS News polling shows a large majority of Americans disagree with that move.
Let's bring in our CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto.
You've seen the CBS News polls that show you what voters think. But behind every number is a person with a story.
That facade of the American dream, it's unraveling.
Do you think democracy is threatened?
I think there's a threat.
So I hit the road to talk to them some more. Let them tell you in their own voices.
We have to start cutting somewhere. Inflation is rampant. Have you bought food lately?
How their experiences shaped what they think.
I came to this country. We had a bagel shop, breakfast shop. It was a lot of work.
Have things gotten more difficult over the last couple of years?
Definitely more difficult.
And why there's more to it than you'd expect.
I would just like, on both sides, for men in general to stop talking about women's issues.
I think we need to find a way to accept the fact that we can be different, but overall, I think most of these people want to see the country do better. We want to see the country continue to grow.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
In Shahola, Pennsylvania, George Floor runs a landscaping business. In a town where his family put down roots generations ago and where the local bar has been a meeting spot just about as long.
The biggest problem with the parties is they're controlled by elites.
Tell me who an elite is.
Somebody who's highly educated, who thinks he's really smart, and he's very arrogant.
Okay.
Floor is one of those 8 in 10 Americans who think the political system needs big changes and that it isn't working for them. He says government spending is one reason behind it.
When they spend money, it really doesn't trickle down too much to the people. Okay, now you do get something once in a while, okay? They'll say highway funding and that sort of thing too. But you have to start cutting somewhere because if we don't, we're finished. Okay? Inflation is rampant. Have you bought food lately?
When people say the economy is the top issue, it's personal too, about whether you can get ahead. Many Americans say for the last couple of years, their financial situation either hasn't changed or it's gotten worse. This is Metro Atlanta, in some ways the epicenter of election politics right now.
You have a good day, be a good listener.
And it's where I met Talia Ayers, who's juggling kids, caring for a parent, and student debt.
Did you want like chips or anything with it too? That facade of the American dream, it's unraveling.
Have things gotten more difficult over the last couple of years for you, or easier?
Definitely more difficult. The price of things is outrageous. So my littles are 5, 4, and 1.
Okay.
We have 1 in daycare, 1 in preschool, 1 in kindergarten. Daycare is just ridiculously expensive. We're paying just as much as our mortgage as we are for daycare. I'm also taking care of my mom. People ignorantly like to say that things were better when Trump was here without thinking about just the state of everything. And even if he was president now, during these times, we would still have the inflation that we have.
If you did take a poll right now and say, how are things going in the country today?
I would say 2 thumbs down, really
2 thumbs
bad.
down, really bad?
I would say it's really bad.
Why?
Well, personal experience of having lots of different properties that I owned. You're seeing new home buyers buy houses at 6% and 7%, and that's just crazy to me.
Brooke Westlake is a mother of 2, divorced, and an entrepreneur, including, in 2020, she opened a cannabis business here in Nevada.
Do you think that it'll be possible for your kids to attain the American dream?
I think my children will, because I think I'm a good mom. I'm a tough mom.
Is your vote this year more in support of Trump or more against Joe Biden?
Well, yes to both. It's definitely against Joe Biden, but it's way more in support of President Trump, 100%.
Is he somebody that you feel your kids can look up to? Is he somebody that represents your values?
Yes, I took my oldest to a Trump rally. He came here to Reno, and I'm hopeful that I get to meet him whether or not he wins. I want to meet a strong individual who's been attacked left and right. It takes a lot of guts when people keep coming at you. That's a hard gig.
Do you think American democracy, as you think about it, is secure or threatened right now?
I don't think that we have a free country right now.
What do you see happening?
I see an influx of mental illness on children. I see parental rights being removed. I see open borders. I see no voter ID.
For both the left and the right, the state of our democracy ranks right up there among their top concerns. One recent hallmark of our politics, especially among Donald Trump's backers, is ongoing suspicions about 2020. Nevada voter Gary Butcher is retired, and since 2020 has been employed by the state as an election worker.
What did you do before you retired?
I was an aircraft mechanic.
Have you always followed politics? Have you always been interested?
No. No, I have not. It's only since I've been retired.
Do you think democracy is threatened?
I think there's a threat.
Yeah? And the threat comes from?
God, I hate to say it this way, but from the Democrats. They put in a lot of laws here in Nevada because of COVID. And we have a Democratic-controlled legislature. They made that ruling that everybody got a mail-in ballot.
So in your perfect world, everybody would show up in person?
Yes.
To vote?
I mean, we did the caucus this year, and I helped the Republicans do the caucus. We had everybody come in and present an ID, vote on paper. We counted it that night, and before midnight, we had the results.
Democracy isn't just about vote counts, though. It's also feeling like you can live together despite your differences. One Democrat we spoke to, who asked us to call her Jane and conceal her likeness, was worried about a backlash.
My parents raised me to work hard and you can get what you want in life. They came from no education, poor families, mixed race. They got married in the 1930s and moved to the Bay Area because that was acceptable then. So I'm a product of my environment where I grew up. The Bay Area, people are tolerant. There was no racism when I grew up. There was people like me everywhere. I learned to live with all different cultures.
Do you see similar attitudes?
No, I see people taking sides, and there's a lot of hate and racism, and I can't tolerate that. Comments. This is where I get hung up.
Let's talk about the fact that you told us you're not necessarily comfortable talking about that, more widely. Why do you feel that way?
Because the MAGAs are violent, and their leader, Trump, keeps talking about retribution and kick their butts and the insurrection he caused, which I believe he's going to try again.
You think he would try something like January 6th?
Oh,
again,
absolutely. Yep.
If he doesn't win the election?
Okay. He's already set that up with his followers. If I lose, it's because it's rigged. If it's rigged, you rigged it.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
On the West Coast, away from its big cities, in a small town perhaps fittingly called Independence, Oregon. I had dinner with a family that pushed back a little on the idea of political labels.
Let's say a little bit of our prayer. We hold hands. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this food that you have blessed us with. Keep us in good health. Keep us safe, Father. Keep us focused on you. We just thank you for all that you do in our lives. So in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. When you hear politicians talk about people who live in different places, right? In the red states and the blue states, cities, small towns, right? How does it make you feel?
Labels aren't necessarily a good thing.
I grew up a Democrat. I'm a Republican as of right now, but I'm gonna go back to being a Democrat.
Okay.
So,
Why'd you switch to being a Republican?
church influence.
Okay. And why might you switch back to Democrat?
Because I believe that there are topics more
Okay.
Issues.
on their issues.
Their son Nick also thinks labels have become too narrow. He's Hispanic, embraces his multiracial background. He plans to vote Democratic in 2024, but says the first vote he ever cast was for Donald Trump.
And I was rooting for him. I gave into his rhetoric of taking America back for Americans.
Who are the people he was going to take it back from?
I did believe at the time it was illegal immigration. Frankly, I can't believe how ridiculous that sounds now.
Well, take me through that change.
I worked with people who weren't citizens yet.
And what were they like?
Kind individuals, hardworking, wanted the same basic things I did.
And you respected that?
Yeah.
But you didn't see it as taking from you. You saw it as somebody in the same position as you.
Mm-hmm.
Nick took one of our polls where just a third say the U.S. economy is good. But Nick is one of those that sees positives, especially for working people like him, because he says opportunity comes from taking action.
Are you thinking about things for the working class that way?
I would say, yeah. 27 years old. I've been in the workforce. I couldn't afford college. I couldn't go to college.
What do you think the younger generation of America needs to see and needs to know?
We need to not get so hung up on the things that were not given to us or not promised on us. We can get angry, we can get frustrated about it, but to get so hung up to where you don't do anything about it.
Despite those negative attitudes about the economy and the state of democracy, we've shown there's still a sizable portion of Americans who believe they can still reach the American dream.
I'm very grateful for this country, for New Jersey. I know that my life would have been so different. So I came to this country when I was 10, and we started a store that is a very typical immigrant story.
Hunju Kwak immigrated to the U.S. with her parents when she was 10 and worked on Wall Street before becoming a real estate investor.
We had a bagel shop, breakfast shop, and it was a lot of work. So you have to be there by 3, 4 a.m. because you have to get the morning rush.
So tell me what you feel when you hear what some call anti-immigrant rhetoric and the debate around immigration today.
It makes me sad. I totally understand the stresses that it can bring on any community when you have a whole community of immigrants that come. I understand, because it creates a huge burden on people who are in the community, and overcrowding the schools and housing becomes an issue. But this country was built on the idea of being inclusive.
Immigration, Americans tell us, touches a lot of issues: cultural, security, economic. For George Fleur, he sees a direct financial cost to immigration.
Has immigration changed your business or this town or anything here?
Not so much yet, okay? Now, I've seen some of my competition, they are employing some immigrants, okay? And I don't care too much, I mean, if they're employed and they're making money and they're contributing, but they should assimilate. There's nothing wrong with immigration, but there should be controlled immigration. As long as you're willing to work and be part of the system and you want to be an American.
So as a teacher, you're seeing the next generation of your students, next generation of Americans, of voters. What qualities do they have?
I think as a whole, they have more empathy. At least in my situation, we're very diverse here in this area. We have trans kids, we have LGBTQ kids, we have Muslims. I don't see anything here of real hate or pushback on these kids.
Anthony Nicodemo is a teacher and basketball coach just north of New York City. He's openly gay and talks of today's culture war battles as part of what he sees as larger fights for equality that have always been part of U.S. history.
Throughout our history, all these different movements connect to each other, whether it's suffrage, whether it's civil rights, labor movement. My father was a laborer for 45 years. As the Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd protests were going on, him animating how he was comparing to the labor movement. And he was defending it almost because he understands that when people get to a breaking point, that's what happens. And I think that particular situation, people were tired of the brutality. They were tired of being treated less than, so they took to the streets. And I think when you look at labor and other such movements, that's exactly how it works in our country.
So when you look around the country, you see on the news people talking about book bans, LGBTQ issues or transgender issues in a school setting, in a classroom. What would you like folks on that side to hear? What would you like them to see?
They need to understand that they can't live in a bubble. And I think when you're in a bubble and everyone you see looks like you or acts like you don't know what's going on outside the bubble. And I always use an example in my classes, if I took one of my kids from the Bronx and I dropped him into the middle of Iowa, he would look odd, right? Because he might not fit in there. So I think that's the bigger piece. You have to understand that there's stuff going on outside the bubble.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
You mentioned a couple of times about it being important to you for your business to support women, business for women. Do you think women are represented enough in businesses?
No.
Do you think women have the same opportunities?
No.
How so?
I've seen it just in the cannabis space. When I entered in 2020, it was roughly about 22% of women were in the cannabis space. We're down to 12%. So I don't think we have the same type of access, but I also don't think some women choose not to seek out that access.
Is there one group that is more supportive of empowering women?
I would just like, on both sides, on the Republican side and the Democratic side, for men in general to stop talking about women's issues and women's health problems and women's reproductive stuff. I think what we need is women to talk to women about our reproduction, about our rights, about our bodies, about the things that we go through, and that's speaking to both parties. I'm talking to the Democratic side and the Republican side.
I'm stunned. I'm stunned at the reversals that I'm seeing.
Of Roe v. Wade?
Yes. It's like, what country are we in that we are seeing the curtailing of what I think are basic human rights? There are some people who, I totally respect it. But I just don't agree with it. and that doesn't make me a bad person and doesn't make the other person a bad person, but it'll impact me at the polls.
As a parent, how does it impact you?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, as a parent, as a mom of 2 daughters, I'm scared of the world that they're gonna be growing up in, where they will not be able to self-determine when it comes to reproductive rights. It just seems like such an innate right that I can't believe we are at this point.
And Talia Ayers also told us she had hopes that remain unfulfilled.
With 2020, between the pandemic and then, all of the police brutality and things like that, and how in almost every major city in the country there was riots. It was the first time I could think of to be like, wow, okay, change is on the horizon. Like maybe some things will happen.
You feel like your voice right now is being
I feel like they
heard.
pacify us. We are given symbols to make it feel like we're heard. Oh, we hear you and we stand with you. And so they'll wear, like how the Democrats did the kente cloth and they took their knee. I'm glad you hear us, but I don't want to just, okay, thank you for Juneteenth as a national holiday, but can you stop killing us? The decision makers are not following through with the things that need to change.
What do you think of Joe Biden?
Old.
What does being old mean?
I think there's, there's old, but then there's like too old. There's just regular, ordinary people, usually when they reach a certain age, you can just be kind of like the Walmart greeter, but we'll let them run the country. And so I think that's kind of the juxtaposition that is kind of wild to me. I do feel like there should be an age cap. And so I feel like he's beyond what the age cap should be.
What makes you think, if anything, that the country could get back on the right course?
Well, the right guy gets in.
Who's that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you have 2 running.
Right.
Donald Trump's policies were really great.
Okay.
I know a lot of people say he's a big mouth and a, blowhard, but you know what? His policies were pretty good.
Okay.
Had Biden kept all his policies,
right,
things would be a lot different right now.
So with Trump, you'll trade what you call the big mouth for the policies.
Right.
Okay.
And that would make sense.
Right.
Okay. I mean, look, he's a New York guy.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
He talks a lot. He talks.
All
right. Well, you know what? But his policies were pretty good.
Okay.
And like Biden had every chance to keep them, but everything that was Trump, we have to get rid of.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? His policies were pretty good there, bucko. I mean,
right.
You could have kept them in, and guess what? The economy would have been roaring.
Do you think Joe Biden's doing a good job, or?
I think Joe Biden has done more than any other president in a long time. The list is unbelievable. The Inflation Act, the environment. He undid all the crap the other guy did. Student loans. There's so much he's doing. I don't understand how people don't see that. If you go on his website, they'll list all the things he's done. They didn't make it up. It's real.
There are a lot of Democrats who say that they might not vote at all. How does that make you feel?
And that has been a problem my whole lifetime. If everybody that's a Democrat would vote, we'd win completely all the time.
Do you know people who would fit that description but don't?
Yeah.
Why aren't they voting?
They don't follow politics. They really don't know what's happening. A lot of people aren't involved.
I don't think there's any president that we've ever had that's perfect, right? We're always going to be able to find some fault. I think a big thing with Joe Biden, going back to what I said about the change in 2000, it's empathy. I think that there's empathy there, right? This administration has empathy. There's things that I would like to see done differently, right? But I think overall, the issues that I care about, my issues, right? Public education, I think on the LGBTQ side, it's the same thing, right? We're back to them passing, pro-trans stuff, education guidelines to help people handle situations that might arise in the school on trans. And then the White House is rainbow during June.
No other country has open borders right now. about 1,800 schools right now that have policies in place that have removed parental rights over sexuality. Children K through 12. My 5-year-old wants to be a superhero. The next day, he wants to help mommy in the kitchen and be a chef. He doesn't know what he wants at 5 years old. You have policies all over littered in public education right now, and we have one here in Washoe County that says that if my son went to the school and said he wants to be a girl, I wouldn't have a right to know.
And do you connect that to politics in the sense, do you see that as a Democratic policy? You see that as a Democratic policy?
Major Democrat policy. Major, major, major.
What do you think are your choices in this election?
They are definitely very different. The only thing that I think is that they are older. I mean, I think that age is a question mark for both. To be frank, to be both.
And if Biden wins?
I do feel that Biden and the Democratic Party will be more accepting of the ideals of the American dream, understanding that immigration can only helps American society.
Did you want to drink something?
So the next time you see a poll, remember the stories and people behind the numbers, and that there's always a little more to it when we listen.
You gotta lean back. Bubba's right there. Look, he's coming in the car. You see him?
What inspires you when you look out at the country? What do you think is working?
A lot of people are standing up for things that they support, and I'm seeing that a lot more. That's a positive thing about our country. We are able to stay connected with people who are like-minded. We're able to have conversations with people who we don't agree with.
I have a customer, he's a socialist. We had a orderly debate. Okay? And he said, you're the first one who actually talked. We didn't end up screaming at each other.
Yeah.
Well, I said, yeah, well, why not? I want to hear what you have to say because I might learn something.
Around here, is your sense that people tend to vote Republican, tend to vote Democratic?
It's a mix. I think in my town, we used to be more Republican, but we have become more Democrat. Because I do know people who are Trump supporters. This is me personally. If I don't agree with you and your political views, if we're not in the same party, that's okay. I don't think of that person as evil or bad, or they're not gonna be my friend, or it's just a political point of view that's different from mine.
Americans are always, no matter how dirty or how far we go or whatever, always bound back. Eventually get that sense of community, I think.
I think the big tent needs to continue, right? We need to pull these people in. It can't just be Atlanta. We need to get outside of the suburbs into the rural areas and pull those people in as well. Same thing in Iowa, same thing in Missouri. We have big social differences. So I think we need to find a way to accept the fact that we can be different, but overall, I think most of these people want to see the country do better, right? We want to see the country continue to grow.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
And welcome back to the studio for this special Independence Day edition of America Decides. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington, and with me are CBS News polling director Anthony Salvanto, our political director Finn Gomez, and our chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here for this special edition. This is the 4th of July. It's Independence Day. What better day to talk about politics and how people are feeling about this country? And one of the big themes in this documentary, Anthony, that was incredible and really great to see you out there talking to the voters that you talk to all the time in these polls. that this idea of democracy being on the ballot, in your conversations with voters, what did they say about what it means to them?
Yeah, look, it was an honor and a privilege to get out there and talk to these folks. And one of the things that I think was common across all of it is that democracy isn't just about voting. Democracy isn't just about a legislative district or the nuts and bolts. It's about responsiveness to a lot of folks. It's about feeling like you have a voice.
I'm so curious, you know, we talk to the voters and hear from the voters, but how the campaigns are talking about this idea of democracy.
Sure, but I want to get back to the voters for just a second, because this project does something that a lot of networks talk about, but kind of give lip service to. Oh, we're going to talk to the voters this campaign. It's going to be different this time around. This is showing the work. We're actually taking and responding to something I hear all the time. I've never been polled. Where do these polls come from?
Right.
This is a way to illustrate exactly where they come from. Not everyone in your documentary was part of our survey data, but most of them were. These are real people with real concerns. And since I've been covering national politics since 1990, there's always a burden in representative democracy. We don't have direct democracy. We don't have referenda, national referenda. I want this to happen. No, you confer your power to a representative in the House and the Senate, and you have to wait for them to carry out your legislative wishes. That's a complicated, slow process. For 30 years, I've heard people say, I kind of feel powerless in this system. Well, yeah, that's also by design. What matters in a campaign context is, how do you reach those people to tell them with your messaging and your candidate, I'm going to be more representative of your interest than the other party? That's the constant struggle. Now it is overlaid, well, wait a minute. Do I feel confident in the system itself? And what our polling and those interactions, Anthony, discovered was some misgivings about the system itself. The infrastructure, not just the scaffolding on the outside, but the very pillars of our structure. And that's something that is complicated for any campaign to address.
There's a gulf between, yes, the policymakers, between the candidates and the voters in the field, especially in those 6 or 7 key battleground states. And I think, you know, the question about elitism, I mean, we've been hearing this when we all go out in the field, when we talk to voters, they feel that they're not being heard. And I think that that disconnect is and Anthony does such a great job of illustrating that, they feel that it has to be shortened. They feel that their voice has to be heard more. And it's not just, you know, at the polls, you know, which was just, you know, a little over 100 days until we get there. But it's also now, like how these campaigns are forming their platforms and listening to them, and I do feel that often. You know, just being in Georgia recently and talking to especially some young voters there, they feel that they're just yelling as loud as they can, and they're not being heard by either of these two presumptive nominees.
And we live in an era of overpromising. When you have negative partisanship and intense dislike of the other party, the party that is seeking power will overpromise about what it can do. And when you overpromise, setting aside, because you have to when you overpromise, all the structural difficulties of getting things through a complicated legislative process in Washington, guess what happens over time? Not immediately, but over time. People get frustrated because they have been promised more than ultimately gets delivered.
And there's another part, speaking of complicated, but in a good way. And that is what I learned and what I wanted to show is that people are more complicated and more complex than often we get, in whether it's in a soundbite or sometimes just on a poll graphic too. So you saw a lot of, some would say contradictory, but in fact what you hear is people can hold multiple ideas in their heads at once. And they can think, well, I think all this and this party's good on this, but not so much on that.
People are not all red and not all blue.
Right.
People can be partly red, partly blue, and make an ultimate decision, maybe that's 55-45, red or blue. But that doesn't mean they have no ideological understanding or compassion or interest in that other side of the political equation.
And a lot of layers of purple in between as well, especially those battleground states again. Like they're not siloed, they're not, you see that and you hear that. And I've heard that as well, like along the border in some of those states, including Nevada and Arizona, on how voters feel about immigration, for example.
Yeah, I mean, voters have the capacity to think about a lot of things at once. And as we always do, We should give them more credit than others do as well. Stick around. Anthony, Major, and Finn, stay with us. You're streaming America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here? What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense? What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America.
We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish
That
you and
we
I are going to
just-
have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions. What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here. We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way. We'll take you places. We teach you new things. And we make you feel like, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Welcome back to a special Independence Day edition of America Decides. My colleagues Anthony Salvanto, Major Garrett, and Finn Gomez are still here with me. We are talking about this amazing documentary that Anthony did, talking to voters. And Anthony, I know you spoke to voters before that debate, heard round the world, seen round the world. And I know that age was already kind of a concern for voters, but I know you also went back and talked to them after the debate. What were you hearing? What was their takeaway in terms of age?
I did. Before the debate, it was interesting the way they structured their thoughts on age, because partly it was concern about performance in office, but it was also about whether that meant the candidates could be in touch, particularly for younger folks, that there was that distance there. Well, in either case, we went back after the debate, like you said, and I talked to Anthony again, and I talked to Talia again. Take a listen to that.
I don't believe that President Biden cannot be president. I think, all of us as we get older, right, we hit a point, we slow down a little bit. But I think what he's done as president through this time, I think he's fine. I think that on that particular day, in that particular moment, in that particular format, he didn't look strong. As far as I'm concerned, he's had a great record. And, I think we're at a point right now where we need to continue to support him, especially with what we have on the other side.
I don't know who won the debate, but I definitely know that America lost. It did not look good. coming from either side. I'd say the most coherent thoughts that we had from either was them talking about their golf swing, which was really disappointing. If you both are running because the other is running, then how about you both just fall out? Just go ahead and stop. You both stop and we'll get some people in there who actually want to do the job.
And Major, I know you've been speaking to Democrats across the country at very high levels. What's your assessment of whether and how this debate changed voters' impressions of Biden?
Democrats know that it didn't help, and it probably hurt at a time when the Biden campaign wanted this debate to reset not only perceptions of the president's vigor, acuity, ability to carry out the job, not just now, but for 4 full additional years, but also they lost ground on the argument over the issues that currently favor the former president. Not only was he supposed to address, that is to say the president, all of these atmospheric issues about his abilities, but also to reset, if possible, through fiery exchanges with the former president, what inflation actually is. What is his record? What is his record on immigration? What is his record on crime? That didn't happen. So it's a missed opportunity twice over. And Caitlin, there is a fundamental truth in every campaign. You have 2 resources that you can never get enough of: time and money. Ever since Thursday night, Democrats have been spending time rebuilding the dam around the president. That's time wasted. That's time not prosecuting the case against your number 1 opponent, former President Trump. And there is now questions about the ability to raise money. Yes, grassroots donations have been good, but they know, Democrats that is, it would have been so much better had it been a better debate performance. So you're losing money and you're losing time. That's something no campaign can afford to do.
And I think it's important to note also the Biden campaign but prior to this debate, wanted to make this debate about it was going to be a referendum on Trump's agenda looking forward. And now it has become, speaking to some top Democrats in Biden's world, it's become a referendum on Joe Biden and his age. And they feel both sides know that that is now something that they have to continuously will address from here until November 5th.
And Anthony, going back to the voters here, I think all of this post-debate analysis, puts a spotlight on the ways in which voters have the actual ability to choose who their nominees are. I mean, the primary system is structured to, in a political way. Can you talk to us a little bit about the way in which voters have or don't really have a say in who we put up on the ticket?
And that creates some of the disconnect that you see, because voters consistently say, like you said at the top of the show, they're worried about democracy for an assortment of reasons. They may or may not feel like they have a voice. Big ideas, not to mention the economy and immigration and every other issue. And yet they're asked to sort of make this binary choice between 2 candidates where when you ask them face-to-face or in the polling, they say, this isn't the matchup we would have picked, right? So the choice that they have immediately in front of them does not reflect, and I mean in a sort of does it meet the moment way, not an ideological way, does not reflect the import that they see in the election. And that creates a disconnect. And yes, it's created some of a frustration that you hear out there, that it's almost this sort of too set up, right? It's all been too set up. Not everybody wanted Donald Trump as the nominee. Not everybody wanted Joe Biden as the nominee, even if you weren't going to vote for them. This wasn't the matchup that you necessarily wanted. And that comes out of a primary process. And the last point here is that primary process is often participated in by the most ideological people out of all the voters, and not the folks more in the middle.
Very quickly, it might create a kind of misplaced nostalgia for the smoke-filled room. Smoke-filled rooms would not produce these 2 nominees. They just wouldn't. The old party structure, deciding without the consent of the voters through a primary caucus process, would not have yielded these 2 nominees. Not close.
Right. I mean,
I'm not saying that is something we want to go back to, but people feel disconnected. They're like, wait, how did this happen? It happened through a democratic small d process, but was the campaign really joined with President Biden? No, not by any real stretch. Barely with former President Trump. It was a kind of layover for both of them through a primary and caucus process. It really wasn't intense. But this is where we are, and that's the process.
And after this break, a discussion about freedom of speech and our public discourse on this Independence Day. You're streaming America Decides.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush. What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That Desired Farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Welcome back to a special Independence Day edition of America Decides. Back again with Anthony, Finn, and Major. So let's start with kind of what we've all been talking about this whole segment, which is kind of how voters are feeling about this election and kind of where we go perhaps from here over the next few months. Anthony, I'm curious your takeaways.
Big takeaway is, first of all, people don't dislike each other as much as it might seem when you watch a campaign. That's number one. Number two is people feel like they can connect or at least understand the other side. Let's not pretend we're all going to agree on everything. That's really the point, right? We have a democracy. We have differences. They're respectful of other sides. They're respectful of differences. And I think they're asking for a politics that they feel is the same.
And Finn?
I would just say that on this day, where it's Independence Day, where we're celebrating the greatest assets and characteristics of our country, including collective union. I think as we get closer to Election Day, this becomes more and more like high school. We're reverting back to a place where there's tribalism, bullying, and frankly, just mean candidates, and so like it's such a contrast from what we hope to be to where we are as a country, especially because if you look at the construct of this campaign, and and I think we've been hearing that, and we've been hearing that across the landscape. So I mean, will that improve? It's only going to get worse, I suspect, before the election.
This is a time that asks a lot of a country, a big national election. And we have a more diverse polity than we've ever had before. Members of Congress reflect that diversity. A country itself reflects that diversity.
And I think that one of the things we need to worry about is when people feel like they can't discuss or have those differences. We saw in the documentary the woman who didn't want her identity to come out because she was worried about neighbors or other people in the town who might, she was worried about them. She was worried that they might, do something to her that just based on her political views. In a democracy, it's not just about voting. In a democracy, it's about, can you adjudicate differences and still feel like you can all live and work within the same system? And that's one of the things that our politics, in some respects, we learned is creating in terms of worry. It's not just division. It's the idea that can you go out and have these conversations? Can you work through these differences in a reasonable and peaceful and calm way? And I say, as it comes out in the polling, it comes out when you go talk to these folks, they do want to do that. And that is important. There is that underlying commonality, and everybody wants to be optimistic about the country. And that's a big takeaway for me on this Independence Day, that people really do have pride in their country, and they want it for all its differences. In fact, to celebrate all those differences, they want it to keep getting better.
That's the buy-in.
And whether our leaders can rise to that occasion remains an open question as well. Well, this program is called America Decides for a reason, because we get to hear from voters. Anthony, thank you very much for bringing those conversations to us. And Finn and Major, thank you very much for your astute analysis, as always. And that does it for us today, but we hope everyone has a wonderful Independence Day. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Good night.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the